Hey everybody, and welcome back to another One Candle Paranormal Case File. Here with your host, Vic Waitley.
And Marcus D.
And tying up your hiking boots, because we're going to be trekking after the Almas.
The Almas is a mysterious humanoid found in the folklore throughout the Eastern Hemisphere. It's mainly found in the stories of people from Mongolia, Russia, and the Caucasus. The Almas is generally described as being human-shaped, bipedal, and between about 5 and 6.5 feet tall. Their bodies are covered with this reddish-brown hair, and they have facial features including a pronounced brow ridge, a flat nose, and a weak chin. Often grouped among stories of Yeti or Bigfoot, the Alma should actually be considered, according to us, its own entity.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about the Almas that makes it particularly unique among this classification of cryptid, distinctly different from Bigfoot and Yeti and things like that. One of the most notable ones is that it's often seen wearing primitive clothes or furs, something not commonly seen among many of these other cryptids. Another thing is that, according to some accounts, the Almas will also engage in trade with some of the local people, usually having to use primitive gestures to convey what it means.
Yeah, when you look up stories about like Bigfoots or the Yetis, most of the time a lot of their behavior seems to be that they're rummaging for food, they're trying to defend their own territory, they're trying to scare people away.
Yeah, and a lot of aggressive posturing.
And this isn't something that you typically see with Alma stories. They seem to be minding their own business. They're, like Vic said, they're trying to engage in trade with other people around them, almost like their own specific culture.
Yeah, and the Almas can actually be cited back to some ancient Tibetan books. These are books that were mainly about medicine, but did go over many different animal species. And one of the interesting things about that is there aren't mythical creatures in there, but the Almas is listed in there. This isn't like a medieval bestiary that has griffins and gargoyles and dragons and things like this. It was just the animals that were known to be in the region, nothing too far-fetched. And the only thing that seemed odd about it is pretty much the inclusion of the Almas. Which leads me to think it likely is something that they consider to be just part of the natural region.
What really jumped out at me when I was researching the Almas is this size difference between the Almas and stories of like Bigfoot or Yeti. Bigfoot or Yetis are almost described being like 7, 8, even all the way up to 10 feet tall in some stories. The Almas is described to be much shorter, more closely akin to like a human size, 5.5, 6.5 feet tall.
Another thing that makes this particularly unique is when you get to attempting to classify it. When classifying humanoids, you pretty much classify them between robust and Grassian. We humans, we're Grassian. Things like gorillas, they're robust. Sasquatch, probably are robust. But these, their body shape, their form, they're very similar to humans. And I would almost think, unlike Yeti and Bigfoot, this would probably be a Grassian. But this starts to beg a question. Are we talking about a distinct species? Are we talking about some sort of cryptid? Or could this possibly be Homo sapiens with unique adaptations? My personal thoughts on it, I think this could possibly just be a group of isolated Homo sapiens that have developed some unique features. And we see this in other mammals. If you take a domesticated pig, let it run wild, it'll start growing thicker fur, it's going to start growing tusks, and having humans get lost from common civilization and then just kind of joining into the wilderness, it's not uncommon. It's something that happens every so often. You hear about these cases come up maybe 2-3 times a decade.
Yeah, what makes me lean towards that is the distinct differences that we've already kind of described in the Almas. You're seeing these cultural aspects of it. Some of them are wearing clothes. They're trading with local people around them. I mean, if you look at some of the stories like that go back to like the 1960s, there are accounts where it talks about children playing with Almas children. That to me sounds like there's some sort of a dialogue going on between these two groups. Like there's some sort of civil understanding between the two.
Yeah, it's almost like an isolated culture that lives separate but nearby each other. They understand each other. They're the same sort of thing, except for one of the cultures is isolated enough that they've started to appear a little different. They're probably interbreeding with their own groups. And, well, you pick up a lot of distinct characteristics when you do this. The biggest hurdle that I see here is the thick reddish hair over the body. That's kind of odd for humans, but it's not impossible.
We have seen this in humans. I think it's called hypertrichosis. I hope I said that right. It's the Wolfman syndrome, some people describe it as. It's where people just grow like large amounts of hair like all over their bodies. We've seen this throughout history where people have, had like hair growing all over their bodies, so they look almost animalistic.
Yeah, there's that famous family in South America where particularly many of the males will just develop this odd characteristic.
And we already kind of know this can be passed along in family genes. So if you have a culture that's living isolated out in the wilderness and they're, breeding amongst each other, then maybe that's why you're seeing multiple people with this particular type of trait.
A lot of people associate the story of the Almas with the story of Zana. It's a very unfortunate incident, and we'll go into some detail on it here.
So in 1850, some men from modern-day Georgia in the Caucasus captured a woman that they later named Zana in the nearby mountains. Well over 6 feet tall, incredibly strong, she was kept in a cage with local people throwing food at her. She was incredibly violent until their captors finally were able to socialize her enough to complete some simple chores. Now this is how the story is usually told, and even with this sort of tone. But what no one ever expresses enough, I think, is that this was a person. This was a person who was kept in a cage and had food thrown at her, which is no wonder why she was violent. I mean, Zana was eventually able to have children with a man in the town, and these children grew up to have children of their own. They've DNA tested this family extensively, and have found that Zana's ancestors likely originated out of Africa.
Well, I guess the question is, should the story of Zana be associated with the Almas? Personally, I think no. I think this is a tragic story all on itself. Zana was likely not part of this breakaway culture living in these scarce regions, because when she was brought in, she really was not socialized to normal human habitation. More likely, she was an unfortunate soul that was just living out in the wild on her own, because she didn't seem to be very well adjusted to being around other humans. When they saw her bizarre behavior, well, they reacted like she was an animal, and the whole tragic event unfolded from there.
I talked a little bit about how they had DNA tested Zana's family extensively. They believe that her ancestors originated out of Africa. So it's quite possible that Zana's ancestors could have just come out of Africa and settled somewhere within the Caucasus Mountains and were their own isolated group living out in that area that they had found. It's not uncommon, I think, for when one more technologically advanced civilization comes into contact with a less technologically advanced civilization, that the more technologically advanced civilization often considers the other, less human and subhuman. So I don't think with respect to Zana that it's a good idea to consider her connected to the Almas. So with that, guys, I guess it's time to talk about what we think our thoughts are here. What's your thoughts, Vic?
Okay, my thoughts on the Almas is that I think likely they're a group of humans living in these isolated areas, probably trying to generally avoid people. They seem sociable, and they seem to have their own culture unto themselves. When we get to some of the odd adaptations, well, it does get a little hard to explain, but it's nothing outside the ability to a Homo sapien to adapt to. We can develop hair. They might have it more advanced due to particular adaptations that they've needed to survive, but I think it's a culture that's been isolated for long enough. They have their own distinct adaptations, and occasionally they run into regular people when they're out and about, and that's where the story of the Almas comes from. At least that's my guess on the subject.
I think I'm in the same ballpark as Vic. I think the Almas is, or possibly just was, a group of isolated humans that lived out on their own. Possibly could have been a group of humans with hypertrichosis. I mean, there's examples across the world of just groups of people who want to live in the wilderness apart from everybody else. Honestly, it only takes one disease, famine, or violent encounter to just wipe them out. So in truth, the Almas probably doesn't refer to a cryptid, but more likely, just a group of people who look different from us. But we'll let you guys decide.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to our most recent episode. Sorry parts of this was a bit of a downer, but we're tackling some serious material today.
I think we really enjoyed doing this video because I really felt like we had added something to the conversation about the Almas that I think really needed to be said.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of material out there, even on YouTube, which is usually populated with tons and tons of opinions. There's just not much out there on this.
And I think when we saw some of the stuff that other groups were doing, we really just felt like some of the stuff in this video just really needed to be said. But if you guys like the content of this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because it really helps out the channel.
And don't forget to hit that notification icon to get updated whenever we put out new material.
And if there's any video that you guys want to see, put it in the comments below because we always love doing videos that our fans request. But most importantly, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.